Here today on SalesTV.live. I'm Gretchen Gordon, and I am an author of the best-selling book, The Happy Sales Manager, and a speaker and president of a sales consulting firm, Braveheart Sales Performance. And I am super excited to have John Pattison joining me today. So John, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm John Pattison, and I'm COO of Objective Management Group. And we provide various assessments for sales organizations for both assessing incoming talent and selecting talent, and also evaluating existing talent in a sales team.
Perfect. So the reason that I asked John to participate with me today is because we use OMG, or Objective Management Group, evaluations and assessments with our clients. And I'm always fascinated by the vast amount of data that is accessible, and we tap into it quite a bit to think about ways that we can help our clients, execute at a higher level. And so in particular today, I asked John to pull together some information, and we're going to talk about a few things as it relates to some of the topics in my book, The Happy Sales Manager. So I guess a couple things. John, can you just give us like the overview of the scope of the data that you have, like how many folks and because we're going to quote some statistics, and I want everyone to have a feel for where this information is coming from.
Sure, absolutely. So we assess about 75,000 individuals a year at Objective Management Group. And those are a combination of salespeople, sales managers, people who are responsible for directly managing salespeople, and sales leaders, those being people who are kind of 2 degrees of separation from the actual revenue producers. OMG was founded in 1990, so we have 34 years of information going back here to be able to identify various trends going on, and things have changed, and certainly what we measure has changed over that time as well. But there are a lot of aspects of selling that haven't really changed over that time. We have information from just about every major industry and global information as well. And some of the unique data we have is tying together managers with the salespeople that they report to. And we'll go through some of that today. That's really interesting to see how a manager's abilities can impact the abilities of salespeople reporting to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you bring up a really good point, because I kind of have this belief, and the reason I wrote the book is because frequently salespeople get blamed for all that goes wrong in not, achieving sales growth in an organization. But frequently what we've found, and I think we'll probably support this with some data, is that the sales manager is often at the heart of the problem, but it's actually not generally their fault. Most sales managers get to that spot because they were promoted from sales, and unfortunately, they don't get, they don't get analyzed for the skill sets and the mindset that is necessary to be successful as a sales manager. They only, get evaluated, let's say, or picked to become the sales manager because they were a top producing salesperson, and, leadership just wants them to teach all of the salespeople how to do what they did. And, but unfortunately, there are different skill sets that are required, and different talents that are required, different traits that are required. And they typically, what we see, in the vast number of companies that we work with that, primarily are in the middle market, is that the resources just aren't there to train and teach sales managers how to shift from being a salesperson to a sales manager. So it's not really their fault. They're doing the best they can, but they just don't know what they don't know. So when I talk about needing different skill sets to be effective as a sales manager, sales leader, as opposed to a salesperson, to make the distinction, for instance, sellers, salespeople may need to hunt. They may need to be effective prospecting. They may need to be good at qualifying accounts. They might even need to be good at as an account manager, depending on, their particular role. But sales managers don't necessarily need to hunt themselves, may not need to really be in the weeds on the qualifying, and they shouldn't be managing, like an account manager. So they need a whole batch of different skill sets. I feel really passionate, I guess I would say, about 4 in particular. The ability to motivate or inspire their team members, the ability to hold the individuals on their team accountable, the skill to coach those people to be the best they can be, to be better than they would be if the manager weren't there, and to hire effectively and efficiently. So those are completely different skill sets that are needed by managers as opposed to salespeople. So those are really the 4 that I kind of like to focus on. So let's talk about those, if you don't mind, John. So the first one, motivating, or motivation. I have found that an awful lot of leaders and business owners, leaders, managers think that salespeople are money motivated. That's why they are in the sales arena. And there's 2 different things that pop into my head. The managers think that they're money motivated because the salespeople probably tell them, yeah, I want to make as much money as I can. And maybe they think they're supposed to be money motivated because there's, a commission component that comes along with the position. But just saying, I want to make more money, or wanting to make more money, doesn't make someone money motivated. So I know that, OMG breaks down the different motivating elements into 3 buckets, right? So do you want to talk about that for a second,
Yeah,
John, about what those look like?
absolutely. So, yeah, it's interesting. If we go back to OMG's first 20 years, like you said, the main aspect of motivation that people recognize was financial motivation, right? That wanting to earn more money. But then when 2008 came around, a funny thing happened. People started to be, everybody felt like, gee, my salespeople aren't motivated. Well, it wasn't that they weren't motivated. It's just when there are all these layoffs happening in the company, people weren't going to say like, John needs more money, because they felt bad about it, or they felt like they weren't being a team player doing that. And then with other shifts as well, what we saw was there was more of a shift to this intrinsic motivation, right? If you think about people just entering the workforce today, yes, they want to achieve financial success, but there are other factors as well. They want to feel good about what they're doing. They want to feel successful. And so we saw a big shift in the 2010s towards that intrinsic motivation, more of that intrinsic motivation. Additionally, so that's extrinsic and intrinsic, and then we measure 1/3 type, which is altruistic motivation. This is a little less common, but that's people who are really motivated by helping others, and that's what drives them. Now, there's some obvious things about motivation, like you want to be able to match your comp plan to what motivates people. But really, it comes down to understanding that people might not be driven the same way you are. And if you're not meeting them with that same drive, if a manager doesn't recognize the style of motivation that a salesperson has, then they're not going to be able to get that traction to make all the other great things happen in the sales organization.
Yeah.
More recently, we've actually seen surprisingly more of a trend back towards that extrinsic motivation. If we look at the past 5 years or so, we've been seeing that trend increase again.
And the funny thing is that I think about it because we have kind of short memories. We did see a big dip in extrinsic or money motivation, huge, around the right around that 2008, 2009, the great time period. And you're right. I think people felt guilty. They also felt like wanting to earn more money was a bad thing. We got into this whole work-life balance. At least I have a job, that kind of thing. But what I find fascinating is, so when we say, okay, we've made a shift, or not made a shift, we're making a shift. We're seeing more and more people being extrinsically motivated or potentially money motivated, if you just want to call it money, material rewards, that kind of thing. The funny thing is that it's still only 37% are fully extrinsically motivated. There might be some balance in there. And so I know when I speak to groups of leaders, they either don't believe or don't want to believe that means 63% of the salespeople out there, the vast majority, almost two-thirds, right, are not fully extrinsically motivated. And I think they don't want to believe it because they were probably money motivated, right? They were salespeople back in the day, and that's why people get into sales. So you're right. We really have to think about how we're approaching this subject. And my goal is that leaders and sales managers understand that the workforce has changed, and it's not the workforce of coffees just for closers anymore, right? The workforce has changed, and so the managers have to change with it. We could probably talk about this subject for hours, John, but we probably should move on. So the second, so we talked about motivation first, or motivating. The second is holding team members accountable. And I have this, kind of simplistic view of why salespeople don't succeed. And the first reason is that they don't do enough of the right stuff. And this is at its core, accountability. It's being the accountability partner. I know that an awful lot of people think when we talk about accountability and holding individuals, kind of feet to the fire on their plan and what they said they would do to produce enough business. A lot of people think that means micromanagement, and it's actually the opposite of that. Micromanagement is having to tell someone what to do every single day. Accountability is just being a partner and helping the other individual do what they said they were going to do, or live up to their commitments. Do you have statistics on the percentage of salespeople who are proficient, or I'm sorry, sales managers who are proficient holding salespeople accountable?
Yeah, so our data show that about 39% of managers are effective at, or really proficient at holding their salespeople accountable. Two of the major deficiencies we see is not measuring KPIs for their salespeople. And of course, holding salespeople accountable, it feels good to be held accountable, right? You know what your expectations are. And measuring by some type of numbers makes it easier for salespeople to understand what those what those measurements are and whether they'll be viewed as a success. Nobody wants to be surprised by whether somebody thinks they're doing a good job. And then additionally, there's a general problem with managers accepting mediocrity from salespeople. And that can come from a number of different underlying reasons that cause that acceptance of mediocrity. But really, our view is the byproduct of accountability is salespeople taking responsibility. And the salesperson who's held accountable will take responsibility because they understand those expectations.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So, if I heard you correctly, 39% of sales managers are proficient at holding salespeople accountable. So that's, less than half the sales managers that we have this, access to this data on. My guess is that it's because sales managers equate that accountability with micromanagement, and they don't want to do that. So it really starts with it actually starts back with motivation and what are the goals that the individual has, and how can I tap into those, and then how can we hold them accountable to the activities that they need to perform, the behaviors that they need to exhibit to produce the outcomes that they want. One other quick thing that I want to touch on in this regard is that if there are sales managers listening to this and they have a heightened need to be liked by their salespeople or a need for approval, that can make it more difficult to hold people, accountable for what they said they were going to do. I think, John, you had a statistic with regard to sales managers that exhibit a strong need to be liked or strong need for approval from their sales.
Yeah, and that would be 11% by our measurements. 11% of sales managers really exhibit that strong need for approval, specifically from their salespeople. It's very common for salespeople to have issues with need for approval from prospects. Of course, that gets in the way of asking tough questions and uncovering compelling reasons to buy. But kind of an often overlooked aspect of that need for approval is specifically from the salespeople. And if you want to be liked and loved by your salespeople, you're not going to be able to hold them accountable. Because you won't ask the same reason with prospects, right? You're not going to ask those tough questions and challenge people.
Exactly. No, that's good. That's good information. So maybe some of the people that are watching or listening are, going, oh, maybe that's why I have a hard time, sticking to getting my folks to stick to what they said they were going to do. So there are ways to get through that. We help sales teams all the time with that, and sales leaders. So we talked about motivating. We talked about holding people accountable. Our third, kind of core component that we wanted to address was coaching. And I said that there were two reasons why salespeople fail. The first is that they don't do enough of the right stuff, and we addressed that with accountability. The second reason that salespeople fail is they might be doing enough of the right stuff, but they're not very good at it, or they're not very skilled. They're not expert at it. They haven't developed that muscle, so to speak. So if that's the case, so that's why I kind of go in this progression. We got to know why they're working and how we can get them to do what we need them to do and what they need to do to accomplish their goals. So we need to know their goals. We need to hold their feet to the fire to make sure they do the activities and the behaviors, so we know that they're doing enough of the right stuff first. And then if they're still not meeting expectations, or quotas aren't being met or goals aren't being met, that's when we can jump in, and that's when the manager really needs to put on their coaching hat. Now, you shared some stats with us about sales managers. 39% are good at holding people accountable. I find, and I think you're probably going to support my assumption that we sales managers are lacking in some coaching areas as well. right? Because there's a lot of measurement of what goes on from a coaching perspective. Would you mind talking a little bit about some of the data that you've collected
Yeah.
on managers' ability to coach?
Yeah, absolutely. So our data show that only about 18% of sales managers are proficient at coaching. And like you said,
No, wait a minute. Hold
that's
it.
what they're
Stop
supposed
right
to be,
there.
coaches, right? That's what they're supposed to do. And
Oh man,
18%, only
18%.
about
Holy
18%
moly.
are
Okay.
truly proficient at coaching. Um, and, these are our measurements, but you see these reflected as well. Like when we were talking about the managers being 39% of them being effective at accountability. Well, coincidentally, only 41% of salespeople take responsibility. And you see the same thing here with coaching. Coaching deficiencies are directly reflected by poor tactical skills of salespeople, and those cause a lot of the problems that companies have in their sales cycle. Of course, like you touched on, one of the big problems is not spending enough time. On average, managers report spending only 19% of their time coaching. Now, a lot of them probably think like, that's a lot. That's 1 day a week that I'm spending coaching. Our benchmark, and a lot of experts agree, that should be closer to 50%. This is the most important aspect of the job of a sales manager, is to coach people. We also ask salespeople how frequently they're coached. Only 3 of them report that they're coached daily. Only 8% say multiple times per week, and only 21% say that they're coached weekly. So managers are reporting they're not spending much time, and the salespeople agree that they're not getting enough time. Also, the types of coaching. A lot of people, when you mention coaching, they think it's letting the salesperson ride along on a call, and of course, that's not coaching. That's just passive listening. So only 14% of salespeople report receiving opportunity-specific coaching. Only 12% report that they receive coaching that helps them make them a better salesperson. So definitely, salespeople recognize that they're not getting enough coaching or the right types of coaching, and managers report the same thing, that they're just not spending the time on coaching that they should.
It has always struck me about the data regarding coaching and time spent, coaching proficiency, let's say, and time spent coaching, is that, you and I have talked about some of this data, that if a sales manager is actually effective at coaching, and we know that that's a small percentage, right? Say 18% of sales managers are effective or proficient at it. If they are effective at coaching, the salespeople that report to them will be about 16% more effective, which means, they're going to close, maybe 16% more business. If they spend 50% of their time coaching, if the manager spends 50% of their time coaching, the salespeople will actually be 28% more effective, those that report to them. And if you do both, you can increase effectiveness by 49%. But what this says to me is that even if it's not perfect, you got to do more of it, right? So even if certainly, being proficient at coaching, we'd like managers to become better coaches, not just telling salespeople what to do. But there's really not enough true coaching going on, and there's not even enough attempts at coaching. So that would be the moral of the coaching story. And we've got to continue to move on. So we'll move to the final, key component, which is hiring. And I wish that I had known earlier in my career the importance of using a systematic, repeatable process, not just trusting my gut, to select sales people, because it's just soul crushing to have ineffective sales people on the team. And some experts tell me that if you are hiring salespeople that aren't effective, that they can be costing your company, somewhere between 3 and 5 times their pay. So if you're paying a salesperson $100,000 and they're not effective, it's actually costing your company $500,000 in, time, energy, frustration, and in opportunity cost. So just real quick, John, can you tell us what percentage of sales managers are actually good at recruiting new salespeople?
Yeah,
to
so
their
the good thing
team?
is it's better than coaching. Our numbers show 45% of managers are proficient at recruiting onto their team, which is still disappointing to not see that number higher.
Yeah, and one of the things that sales managers can do from the get-go is teach them a repeatable sales process. And sadly, less than 50% of sales managers are proficient at that as well, right?
Yeah.
A consistent and repeatable sales process. So we're our time is ending here. This has been a blast for me. John, how can people find out about Objective Management Group? What's the best way for them to just do some scouting
Yeah,
around?
absolutely.
And then I'll give my contact
Our website
information.
is objectivemanagement.com. We have lots of information on there. We have a research blog that dives into more details as well. And we have some really exciting studies coming out on there. So go to the research blog, subscribe to the blog. We have lots more exciting information coming out soon.
Awesome. And again, I'm Gretchen Gordon, and my company is Braveheart Sales Performance. And probably probably should have a disclaimer here. We're a platinum partner of Objective Management Group, and we feel privileged to be so. We've used their tools consistently with our clients for about 15 years now, believe it or not, and the data continues to improve. So anyways, we can be found at braveheartsales.com. You can find my book there, or you can go to thehappysalesmanager.com. And please feel free to hook up with me on LinkedIn as well. I'd welcome any connections of anybody who reaches out. Thanks a lot. It's been a blast, John. It's been great talking to
Thanks
you.
for having me,
And
Gretchen.